we're seeing here?
I do. It was the Kia Soul that was parked near Mr. Clearman's body on Holden Street during the scene investigation.
Okay. And how many people do there appear to be inside the vehicle?
I observed 2 on this video.
Now, I want to be very clear. We're at 7:48 and 4. Did we see the Clearman's vehicle come into here?
Yes.
This is when it first is arriving in the area of Casablanca.
Yes.
The vehicle that we're seeing here.
I do. It was the Kia Soul that was parked on
multiple occasions the law that's going to be given to you by the court. Multiple occasions the law that's going to be given to you by the court. This is one of those instances. These instructions at the start of the case are relatively short. You'll receive similar instructions at the end of the case in a few days, whether that's Friday or Monday. You'll receive similar instructions. I would ask that you pay attention to the instructions. After I read you the instructions, both sides will make opening statements, and then we'll start with testimony. Ladies and gentlemen, before the trial begins, there are certain instructions that you should have to better understand your functions as a juror and how you should and must conduct yourself during the trial. Your duty is to decide this case based only on the evidence presented and the law given to you by the court. You are not to let any personal feelings of bias or prejudice about things such as race, religion, national origin, sex, or age affect your deliberations. You are not to begin any deliberations or discussion of this case until all the evidence is presented and after I've again instructed you on the law. You are not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else until your final deliberations. As you've already seen, we will stop or recess from time to time during the trial. You may be excused from court when it's necessary for me to hear legal arguments or discuss matters with the attorneys. If during the trial you come in contact with parties, lawyers, witnesses, you are not to speak to them and they are not to speak to you. As I've also already said, you are not to listen to any conversations about this case. Please do not read any newspaper reports or listen to or watch any reports on radio or TV about this trial. You are not to investigate this case on your own or to visit the scene. You are not to engage in any experiments or research relating to any issues, facts, or persons involved in this case. As you've already also heard, you are not to consult dictionaries, computers, websites, or other reference materials for additional information. Anything you may see or hear outside of court is not evidence. You are to decide this case solely and only on the evidence offered and received at trial. Evidence. Evidence is first the sworn testimony of witnesses, both on direct and cross-examination, regardless of who calls a witness. Second, any exhibits the court receives, whether or not an exhibit goes to the jury room. And third, any facts that the lawyers agree to or stipulate to, or which I, as the court, direct you to find. Circumstantial evidence. It is not necessary that every fact be proven directly by a witness or an exhibit. A fact can be proven indirectly by circumstantial evidence. Circumstantial evidence is evidence from which a jury may logically find other facts according to common knowledge and experience. Circumstantial evidence is not necessarily better or worse than direct evidence. Either type of evidence can prove a fact. Whether evidence is direct or circumstantial, it must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the offense before you may find the defendant guilty. Transcripts. You will not have a copy of the written transcript of trial testimony available for use during your deliberations. That means you need to pay careful attention to all the testimony because you must rely primarily on your memory of the evidence and the testimony that's introduced during the trial. Credibility. It's your duty, the duty of the jury, to scrutinize and to weigh the testimony of the witnesses and to determine the effect of the evidence as a whole. You are the sole judges of the credibility, that is the believability of the witnesses and the weight to be given to their testimony. In determining the credibility of each witness and the weight you give to the testimony of each witness, consider these factors. Whether the witness has an interest or lack of interest in the trial, the witness's conduct, appearance, and demeanor on the stand, the clearness or lack of clearness of a witness's recollection, the opportunity a witness had for observing and knowing the matters testified about, the reasonableness of the witness's testimony, the apparent intelligence of a witness, any bias or prejudice, if any is shown, any possible motives for falsifying testimony, and all other facts and circumstances during the trial which tend to support or discredit the testimony. Then give to the testimony of each witness the weight you believe it should receive. There is not a magic way for you to evaluate testimony. Instead, you need to use your common sense and experience. In everyday life, you determine for yourselves the reliability of things that people say to you, and you should do the same thing here. As you know, in this case, the defendant is charged with first-degree intentional homicide. It's alleged that on or about Tuesday, September 22nd of 2020, at 1750 North Holton Street in Milwaukee County, the defendant did cause the death of Jason Clearman, another human being, with the intent to kill that person, contrary to the Wisconsin statutes. To this charge, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which means the state must prove every element of the charged offense beyond a reasonable doubt. The definition of the crime. First-degree intentional homicide, as defined in the Wisconsin Criminal Code, is committed by one who causes the death of another human being with the intent to kill that person or another. The burden of proof. Before you may find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, the state must prove by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the following two elements were present. The elements are: 1, the defendant caused the death of Jason Clearman. Cause means that the defendant's act was a substantial factor in producing the death. And 2, the second element, is that the defendant acted with the intent to kill Jason Clearman. Intent to kill means that the defendant had the mental purpose to take the life of another human being, or was aware that his conduct was practically certain to cause the death of another human being. Intent. While the law requires that the defendant acted with the intent to kill, it does not require that the intent exist for any particular length of time before the act or action is committed. The act need not be brooded over, considered, or reflected upon for a week, a day, an hour, or even for a minute. There need not be any appreciable time between the formation of the intent and the act. The intent to kill may be formed at any time before the act, including the instant before the act, and must continue to exist at the time of the act. Deciding about intent. You cannot look into a person's mind to find intent. Intent to kill must be found, if found at all, from the defendant's acts, words, and statements, if any, and from all the facts and circumstances, in this case, bearing upon intent. Intent should not be confused with motive. While proof of intent is necessary to a conviction, proof of motive is not. Motive refers to a person's reason for doing something. While motive may be shown as a circumstance to aid in establishing the guilt of a defendant, the state is not required to prove motive on the part of the defendant in order to convict. Evidence of motive does not, by itself, establish guilt. You should give it the weight you believe it deserves under all of the circumstances. Your decision, if you're satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant caused the death of Jason Clearman with the intent to kill, you should find the defendant guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. If you are not so satisfied, you must find the defendant not guilty. The information in this case alleges not only that the defendant committed the crime of first-degree intentional homicide, but also that the defendant did so while using a dangerous weapon. If you find the defendant guilty, you must then answer an additional question. That question is, did the defendant commit the crime of first-degree intentional homicide while using a dangerous weapon? Dangerous weapon means a firearm, whether loaded or unloaded. A firearm is a weapon that acts with the force of gunpowder. Before you may answer this question, yes, you must be satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime while using a dangerous weapon. If you are not so satisfied, you must answer that question no. The burden of proof. In reaching your verdict, you're to examine the evidence with care and caution. You're to act with judgment, reason, and prudence. Defendants are not required to prove their innocence. The law presumes every person charged with the commission of an offense to be innocent. This presumption requires a finding of not guilty unless, during your deliberations, you find it is overcome by evidence which satisfies you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. The burden of proof. The burden of establishing every fact necessary to constitute guilt is on the state. Before you may return a guilty verdict, the evidence must satisfy you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. If you can reconcile the evidence upon any reasonable hypothesis consistent with the defendant's innocence, you should do so and return a verdict of not guilty. Reasonable doubt. The term reasonable doubt means a doubt based on reason and common sense. It is a doubt for which a reason can be given arising from a fair and rational consideration of the evidence or lack of evidence. It means such a doubt as would cause a person of ordinary prudence to pause or to hesitate when called upon to act in the most important affairs of life. A reasonable doubt is not a doubt based on guesswork or speculation. A doubt which arises merely from sympathy or from the fear of returning a guilty verdict is not a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is also not a doubt such as may be used to escape the responsibility of making a decision. While it is your duty to give the defendant the benefit of every reasonable doubt, you are not to search for doubt, you are to search for the truth. In just a minute, both sides will make opening statements. The purpose of an opening statement is to give the lawyers an opportunity to tell you what they expect the evidence will show so that you will better understand the evidence as it is introduced during the trial. I will caution you, however, that opening statements are not evidence. At this time, I'll ask both sides to make opening statements, starting with the state. Mr. Huebner.
And Your Honor, for purposes of this, can we remove our masks if it's okay?
Yes. Any issues with that? Fine.
and either steps over the victim or walks right by him, because the victim is fallen down onto the stairs. You're going to see how his blood is literally pooling and going down the stairs. He walks right by this man. He never checks on him. Never gave him a warning. He just pulled out a gun, shot him in the face, and then he leaves. He goes down the stairs. He gets on his bike. He bikes down to the east, and he eventually gets to home. You're going to see videos showing him going to these locations, past a number of different places. He never stops. He never stops till he gets home, where he places the bike down in the basement, a place he normally doesn't keep it. And then he walks out. And he's not seen again for months. He gets home, he doesn't call 911. He doesn't do anything. He goes on the run. He runs from his house. He runs from his scene to his house, and from his house to we don't know where. He is gone for months. And the gun, we don't know where it is. Maybe we'll find out. Months later, in March, a Kentucky State Patrolman has an encounter with the defendant. The defendant lies about his name. He gives a fake name, trying to get away. He says he doesn't have a driver's license, says he's got something from the Bahamas. And when the Kentucky State Patrolman or trooper finds an ID card in the defendant's name, the defendant claims him. He won't say who he is. And that's how he's found. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next couple days, we're going to walk you through this case. We're going to walk you through everything that has happened, the good and the bad. A horrible, senseless incident that begins with a swear word and is escalated to a punch, and it is ended with a bullet into the brain. You're going to hear a case that the defendant did everything in his effort to make certain you would not hear. Because he took off, and he tried to make certain people wouldn't find him. And when this is done, ladies and gentlemen, I will come back up here, and I'll ask you to find the defendant guilty, because we will have proven it. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense.
Court. Do you see my hand? Do you see my whole hand? Or do you only see the side that I'm showing to you? For over almost 1.5 years, there's only been one side of this story that has been advanced by the government, by the media, but today, members of the jury, this week, you will now hear the other side of the story. There's been many interviews by alleged victims in this case, but there's one victim who has not said one word yet, and that is Mr. Theodore Edgecomb. You will hear from him in this case. To the prosecutors, my colleagues on the defense side, to the Clearman family, who our condolences remain, and to the Edgecomb family. Good afternoon, members of the jury. I am attorney B. Ivory Lamar, and I am joined by co-counsel in this case, if you wouldn't mind standing, Mr. Attorney Anik Ahmad, and the defendant in this case that we so are delighted to represent in this case, Mr. Theodore Edgecomb. It is our pleasure to represent Mr. Edgecomb in this case. It is an honor and a privilege to give what we call our opening statement. If you've had an occasion to go to a movie, you know you see what's called previews of the coming attractions or sneak previews of things that are to come. This is supposed to be a guide or a roadmap, if you will, as to what we believe the evidence will show in this case. As an officer of this court, in the course of my remarks this afternoon, I would expect to tell you as honestly and as forthrightly what we believe the evidence to show. As the court has so appropriately indicated, what I say is not evidence. It is just used to aid and guide you as to what we believe the evidence will show in this case. Now, we started this process yesterday through a process called voir dire. And during that process, you heard a lot of talk about justice. And just 2 days ago, we celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King. And I don't think anybody has said it is better than him as we talk about justice. And he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So we are now embarked upon this search for justice, this search for the truth, this search for the facts. Each of you made a number of promises during the voir dire process, and all sides of this case are extremely happy to have you a part of this jury. Abraham Lincoln said it best when he said, the highest act of citizenship is jury service. And you're embarked on that jury service today. And it doesn't just stop with you coming down today, taking a few notes, and listening to the evidence in this case. It only stops if you can and will reach a verdict in this case. A verdict that is based off the evidence and devoid of any type of likeness or bias or anything that you might have for the defendant. A verdict that is devoid of sympathy or passion against Mr. Edgecomb or any party that is a part of this case. Now, you made these promises, and we are mindful of those promises, and we expect that you're going to keep them. Now, we know that you're going to keep these promises and be fair and keep an open mind and decide this case, not on speculation, not on conjecture, not on surmise, but based upon the facts. You then, jurors, are the consciousness of this community. Your verdicts set the standards. You have this rare opportunity, as it seems, to be participants in this search for justice and for the truth. And during the course of this trial, you will likely reach one of the most important decisions of your life. And within that decision, people all across the world can say, this system works. This was a fair trial. These were fair people. So again, thank you for your time, your consideration, and the verdict that you're likely to render in this case. Now, the state came up here, and again, they gave you one side of the story. And at the onset, we want to make a couple things very clear right at the beginning. The defense in this case will be straight shooters with you. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, Mr. Edgecomb is not perfect. He makes mistakes like any other person. And there's three things that we want to talk about right at the beginning of this trial. Number one, Mr. Edgecomb, at the time of September 22nd, 2020, was in possession of a firearm that he was temporarily restricted of based off of a bail order that he had in other cases. We want to go ahead and get that out at the beginning. That's a fact. You will not hear any dispute about that issue. Number two, Mr. Edgecomb, on September 22nd, did in fact punch Mr. Jason Clearman. And that punch was as a result, and you'll learn in the evidence, was a result of racial slurs that came from Jason Clearman. Number 3, you will hear evidence, and it would not be a dispute in this case, that Mr. Edgecomb did not turn himself in, and he was not apprehended until almost 6 months later. Let's just get that out the way. Now, the state in this case will try to convince you that that was because of consciousness of guilt based off his actions on September 22nd. The evidence in this case is going to show otherwise. Now, the state has talked about several parties to this case. And we got Mr. Edgecomb's dirty laundry out the way now. Now that's done. But the other participants in this incident that occurred on September 22nd, let's talk about it. What the state has done is they've shown Jason Clearman in the best light. They showed Ms. Evangelina Clearman in the best light. They've also shown the Milwaukee Police Department in their actions in investigating this case in the best light. Well, members of the jury, here's the other side. Welcome to the dark side. Welcome to the side where a woman who is married to her husband for over 25 years, where she sees her husband laying on the ground, never tries to save his life, never tries to apply pressure to stop any bleeding. The evidence is going to show in this case she never administered CPR. She never took one physical act whatsoever to try to save the man she claimed and purported to love. The evidence is going to show in this case that the same woman, the same wife, never even called 911 to try to save her husband's life. That's what the evidence is going to show. The state just came up and they talked about video evidence as it relates to this case. Video evidence is very important in this case. As you are aware, there are 3 incidents that took place on September 22nd. You're going to learn of the first incident. The first incident where, in our view of the facts, obviously differ, but you're going to learn in evidence that the Clearmans were out drinking heavily, as they often do. You're going to learn that Jason Clearman, at least, had a blood alcohol level of a 0.12, which is 1.5 times the legal limit. You're going to learn that he also had THC in his system. If you're not familiar with THC, oftentimes associated with marijuana, weed. You're also going to learn that the Clearmans get into a vehicle after drinking. They don't call an Uber. You're going to learn the evidence. They don't call a Lyft. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're going to learn they didn't even call a taxi, if you will. But they decided to get into a vehicle and operate that vehicle, and long and behold, they come into Mr. Edgecomb. Where was Mr. Edgecomb coming from that night? Well, the evidence is going to show that the last thing on Mr. Edgecomb's mind was first-degree intentional homicide. The evidence is going to show that Mr. Edgecomb was engaged in trying to prepare what he will refer to as daddy-daughter date night. You're going to hear evidence in this case that Mr. Edgecomb has 5 children. He has a special relationship with each one of his children. And he has one night that he designates for each one so that they can further their relationship, so they can get closer. On this night of September 22nd of 2020, his daughter wanted to have sushi, so Mr. Edgecomb gets on his bicycle. He goes to a place called Dynamite. He places the order for sushi for himself and his daughter. He actually placed that order. He paid for that order. Now this is during, obviously, the beginning of the COVID And a lot of restaurants and businesses at the time would not allow patrons to come inside the restaurant, so you had to wait outside of the restaurant. They told Mr. Edgecomb it would likely be 30 to 40 minutes before his food would be ready. So Mr. Edgecomb says, well, trying to use time efficiently, I'm going to now go try to pick up dessert. I'm going to go to a place called Folio, go grab some yogurt so that they can have dessert to go along with the sushi for daddy-daughter date night. Well, his plans changed when he ran and came across the clearing. The evidence is going to show in this case that as he's riding his bicycle along, he was not coming in direct, going the opposite direction of the Clearmans. He was riding his bike along. The Clearmans, just leaving from drinking at a bar, operate the vehicle, they're going down the street, and there's a vehicle that's parked. There's a vehicle that's parked, ladies and gentlemen, that has their right turn signal on waiting for a parking spot. Well, the Clearmans grew impatient. So what did they do? They come over and they go into the opposite lane of traffic, coming into direct contact with another vehicle. Then they swerve over. And that's when they struck Mr. Edgecomb. Mr. Edgecomb lands on top of another vehicle. And that's not the end of it. Pardon my language, members of the jury. They did not say, however, quote, as the state has argued, what the fuck? That's not what they said. The evidence is going to show in this case that the Clearmans, well, specifically Jason Clearman, yelled out, "Get the fuck out the road, nigger." And it's at that point that Mr. Edgecomb got very upset. It's a very offensive word. Now, Mr. Edgecomb will testify and explain that as a bicyclist, this is not the first time that he's almost been struck by a vehicle. That is not what bothered him. Mr. Edgecomb is going to explain it's the use of that racial slur which set him over the top. So he's not just going to get food and just find a car and just go punch somebody. He goes to the car, he asks Mr. Clearman, "Were you talking to me?" Mr. Clearman says, "Yes, racial slur, I was talking to you." And that's when Mr. Edgecomb punches Mr. Clearman. Now, we make no justification for that. No doubt about it, Mr. Edgecomb should not have taken matters into his own hands. He should have called authorities for them to handle the situation. There's no qualms about that issue. We don't deny he should have handled that matter differently. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Mr. Edgecomb is charged with first-degree intentional homicide. You're gonna learn in this case that Mr. Edgecomb, after he makes the punch, he gets back on his bicycle immediately. He gets back on the bicycle, he's done with it. The way he handled it with the punch was not the best way. We see punches in basketball games, we see them in baseball games, and we most definitely see them in hockey games. Doesn't justify it, but Mr. Edgecomb gets back on his bike. He's done with it. Back on the daddy-daughter date night. Time to go get the yogurt, come back, sit back and might get the sushi, continue on with his night. Nope. The evidence is going to show the Clearmans had different plans. The evidence is going to show that the Clearmans also did not call 911. The Clearmans could have went straight after this incident. They could have, got a description. We've clearly seen Mr. Edgecomb being here today. The technology existed through video to capture him, but instead they went straight. They didn't go straight. They didn't make a left turn. They didn't make a U-turn. Instead, they didn't just follow Mr. Edgecomb. The evidence in this case is going to show they chased Mr. Edgecomb. The evidence is going to show in this case, Mr. Clearman says to his wife, "Follow him." And Ms. Clearman, no objection. She does exactly what her husband says, and she follows Mr. Edgecomb. She comes down the street. The evidence is going to show she's in the middle lane and she's making a legal right turn in the middle lane. The evidence is going to show in this case that she turns the vehicle, the motor roars on that vehicle, and she's now turning that vehicle not into the two lanes that are completely available to her. She turns going directly in the direction of Mr. Edgecomb. And she accelerates aggressively and violently directly toward Mr. Edgecomb. That's not following. Members of the jury, the evidence is going to show they were chasing Mr. Edgecomb. The evidence is going to show in this case that before the vehicle even stops, Mr. Clearman is almost already trying to get out the car already. The evidence is going to show he didn't just get out to go for a nice jog. As Ms. Clearman has told many media outlets, the evidence is going to also show he wasn't getting out to go talk with Mr. Edgecomb either. The evidence is going to show that Mr. Clearman was violently pursuing Mr. Edgecomb. Now, we talked about video in this case. We now know, members of the jury, you can expect to hear evidence that there were 3 incidents in this case. However, only 2 of those incidents were caught on video. Well, let me correct that. Only 2 videos were provided from the government in this case. There's video evidence. You're going to learn that there's a video at Casablanca, which would have captured the first incident. We believe, members of the jury, the evidence is going to show that that incident would have occurred at 7:45 p.m. Does the government give us video showing us 7:45 p.m.? No. You're going to learn, does the government give us evidence showing the videos at 7:30 p.m. from Casablanca? No. The video that the government provided in this case begins at 7:47 p.m., 2 minutes after which time we believe the incident would have occurred. No explanation, just missing. Members of the jury, the second incident, obviously where Mr. Edgecomb now punches Mr. Clearman, you might guess, the government has the full video of that incident. You'll see it in evidence. You'll see the full video. Let's talk about the third incident. As Mr. Huebner just came up and he talked about the poll cams that would have caught both incidents. They have 2 different cameras going 2 different directions. Well, you're going to learn, members of the jury, that the incident, when the detectives arrived, when the medical emergency individuals came, that they were on scene approximately almost 5 hours. I mean, this is a homicide. There's unfortunately a deceased man that's laying on the ground. You're going to learn, members of the jury, that out of 5 hours of potential video, you're going to learn the government doesn't give us the 5 hours of video. You're going to learn, members of the jury, that the government doesn't even give us 4 hours of video. Not 3 hours, not 2 hours. Members of the jury, not even 1 hour of that video showing the investigation in this case. You're going to learn, members of the jury, that the government only provided 1 minute and 34 seconds. 1 minute and 34 seconds of video. We're missing the other 5 hours. That's what the evidence is going to show. Now, you might ask, what is the significance of the rest of the video? Well, members of the jury, as we talked about, we've only talked about one side of the story. Well, let's start talking about the other side. The evidence is going to show in this case that immediately after Mr. Edgecomb leaves the scene, within 6 seconds, see, the media has been showing one part of the video of that 1 minute and 34 seconds. The part that has not been released is the other half. And the evidence is going to show in the other half, Ms. Clearman, 6 seconds after Mr. Edgecomb runs off, she gets out the car. She runs over to the body. She's not running over to the body, as the evidence is going to show, to save his life. She reaches down and she tampers with something. The evidence is going to show it. It's going to be on video. See, this is the other side of the story. This is the other side of the hand. She runs back to the vehicle and she closes the door like nothing happened. Members of the jury, you're going to have to figure out why. Members of the jury, immediately after that, you're going to see a vehicle come into frame. You're going to see a red SUV. This red SUV comes in a frame and it pulls alongside Ms. Clearman at the time. This is right about the 1 minute and 34-second mark of the video. And all of a sudden, the video cuts off immediately as this red SUV gets aligned with Ms. Clearman. And it cuts off. Why it cuts off, I don't know. The evidence is going to show that that video did not cut off coincidentally. They only cut the video off at 1 minute and 34 seconds for a reason. You're going to learn what that reason is. Who is driving that red SUV? Well, the lady in the red SUV, her name is Stephanie Trotter. She's going to be a very important witness in this case. You're going to learn that there's 3 people that called 911 on September 22nd. You're going to learn that one of those individuals was Stephanie Trotter. You're going to learn that when Stephanie Trotter, she observes Ms. Clearman on the phone, not with 911, you're going to learn that Ms. Clearman is on the phone with Anna. So instead of calling 911, the evidence is going to show Ms. Clearman called Anna, whose boyfriend or husband is a police officer. Now, you're going to learn that Ms. Trotter got in contact with the defense in this case. She called the state. She called the police officer. She called 911. She talked to a detective on that evening. And the detective said, well, if you have any other information that you want to tell us, let us know. Well, Ms. Trotter is going to come on the stand and she's going to explain that what she saw that evening was Ms. Clearman getting out the car, running over to the body, which would be a second time, not to save Mr. Clearman's life, not to administer CPR, not to apply pressure to a wound, but she's rummaging through Mr. Clearman's pockets. The evidence is going to show Ms. Trotter is going to come on this stand and she's going to explain to you, members of the jury, that Ms. Clearman was running through Jason Clearman's pockets immediately after this incident. Members of the jury, Stephanie Trotter contacted the Milwaukee Police Department Homicide Unit on the evening of September 22nd of 2020. And she informed the Milwaukee Police Department what took place and what she observed. In the Milwaukee Police Department, you know what they said? Thanks for the information, have a good night. Thanks for the information, have a good night. Now, you're gonna learn, as in voir dire, you heard the state talk about witnesses that they expect to call on this case. Well, you're gonna learn that there's 3 people that called 911. You're gonna learn that 2 of those people that called 911 is on the state's list, but one of them is not. And that one that's not, you're not gonna see the state call Stephanie Trotter in this case. And you, members of the jury, have to figure out why. Members of the jury, it doesn't stop there. 43 minutes after Mr. Clearman is laying on this ground, the detectives are on scene now. The police department is on scene, medical is on scene, the Milwaukee Fire Department is on scene at this time. You're gonna learn that there was, a witness, that one of the officers said, you know what, I've seen him standing there. I believe he has information related to this case. I need to go over there and talk to him. Sounds reasonable, part of the investigation. You're gonna learn in this case, members of the jury, that there was one officer that said, and excuse my language, as I quote, "Fuck that, we got enough. We got the wife, we got one person that called 911, we got enough." And then you're gonna learn, members of the jury, the body cam cuts off. Members of the jury, this case is about this. Members of the jury, that was 24 seconds. I know it might seem a little bit awkward. That was 24 seconds. The evidence is going to show in this case a video of Mr. Edgecomb trying to evade the violent, aggression of the Clearman for 24 seconds. That's just on the video. That's what the video is going to show. That's what this case is about. That's what the case is about. The decision that Mr. Edgecomb made at a particular day, at a particular time, at a particular moment. You're gonna learn Mr. Edgecomb describe Mr. Clearman getting out that vehicle. You're gonna learn Ms. Clearman yelling out the window as well. You're gonna learn him getting out, not just going for a jog, as the state alleges. He wasn't just going for it. You're gonna hear in evidence that Mr. Jason Clearman was chasing Mr. Edgecomb, yelling out more racial slurs. "I'm getting ready to kill you, nigger. I'm getting ready to kill you. I'm getting ready to kill you now." That's what the evidence is gonna show in this case. The evidence is gonna show from Mr. Edgecomb's standpoint that Mr. Clearman has something in his hand at the time he gets into a boxer stance. Mr. Edgecomb is going to describe what he was feeling. He's going to describe what he saw in his perception at that very moment. The evidence is going to show that it just wasn't a boxer stance that Jason Clearman got on, but it was a lunge. A lunge that took Mr. Clearman almost 4 feet when Mr. Edgecomb backs up to avoid being tackled by Mr. Clearman. The evidence is going to show, you're going to hear from the medical examiner in this case. And you're going to learn that Mr. Edgecomb the gunshot did not go off in this case 5 feet away. This will be 5 feet, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You're going to learn Mr. Edgecomb there was no shot that went off at a 5-foot distance. The evidence is going to show from the medical examiner that at most, the gunshot in this case went off at 2 feet. 2 feet. This was the maximum distance. The autopsy report says that it was from 2 feet as the max to several inches. Members of the jury, this is 6 inches. That's what the evidence is going to show. The gunshot goes off at the minimum of several inches. Mr. Edgecomb, when he testifies, he's going to explain to you that the last thing he was thinking about when a gunshot goes off, when he's trying to avoid being tackled by a man that's over 60 pounds heavier than him, was what he's going to do a month from now, or what he's going to do 3 months or 4 months from this very moment. Or, as the state talks about the 6 months, this was the last thing he was thinking about what he's gonna do 6 months at this point. That's what the evidence is gonna show. He was thinking about how he's going to get home to his family at this time. That's what the evidence is gonna show. You will not hear evidence in this case that during the time frame of 6 months that Mr. Edgecomb was not apprehended, that he was somewhere on the beach drinking mimosas. You're not gonna hear that. You're not gonna hear that he was having some grand vacation or having a grand time over the course of these 6 months. What you're gonna hear is that Mr. Edgecomb was actively seeking legal representation. You're gonna hear that Mr. Edgecomb was contacting lawyers all across this state to try to find representation, because one of the reasons that he ran, as he's going to tell you, is that he was scared. He was scared not only of the police department, who might I add labeled him immediately as the Brady Street Killer. Mr. Edgecomb is going to tell you that he contacted lawyers, he contacted organizations, and that he was on a quest to try to raise money so that he could afford legal representation in this case. You're gonna have it, you're gonna get the evidence in this case. That's what the evidence is gonna show. Members of the jury, I want to thank you at this time for maintaining an open mind. I want to thank you for your attention. I know that this jury pool will take great notes and that justice could be rendered in this case equally, impartially, and without bias. Thank you.
Let's talk to the lawyers at the sidebar real quick before we get to the first witness. Jury, my bailiff is passing out notepads. I am going to allow you to take notes during this trial. Over the course of the next few days, you are allowed to take notes. You do not have to take notes. If you do take notes, I would encourage you and implore you to not let it distract you. I'm the kind of person, I don't take very many notes. Some people take lots of notes. Either thing is fine, but the main job you have is to listen to the evidence, view the evidence, listen to the testimony. So don't get caught up in your notepad. Take notes to help you potentially refresh your recollection at the end of the case. Again, you don't have to, but make sure you're listening to the witnesses. State's first witness.
Calls Officer Kremservoa.
Fine.
solemnly swear the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please be seated.
Officer, you take off your mask if you're comfortable with that.
Thank you. I am Detective Esther Kremserova, Detective Esther Kremserova, spelling E-S-T-E-R, last name K-R-E-M-S-E-R-O-V-A.
Just take it, proceed.
Thank you.
How are you employed?
Currently, since September of last year, I am employed as a detective for the Milwaukee Police Department, but I've been employed with the Milwaukee Police Department since December of 2014.
Okay. And prior to becoming a detective, how were you employed?
As a police officer,
And where were you assigned?
District 1 during this incident.
Okay. Now, I want to draw your attention specifically to September 22nd of 2020. Were you assigned to District 1 back then?
Yes,
Okay. And on that date, were you, along with other officers, dispatched to kind of that area of Holton and Brady?
yes.
All right. Why were you sent there?
For shooting,
And when you arrived on scene, what, if anything, did you see?
I saw that the Milwaukee Fire Department was on scene, and I also saw the victim.
Okay. Now, I want to draw your attention specifically, and I'm just going to get this ready here. Your Honor, I have evidence control.
Yes, you do. For the jury, as you can see, there's two screens. You should be able to see either or both of them. If you need to lean forward, lean back, adjust so you can see the screens, please do that.
I want to show you what is marked State's Exhibit number 31. If we're looking at State's Exhibit number 31, is that kind of a diagram that shows the general area of what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Now, to get that back, thank you very much. We're going to place 31 on the big screen. And if we're looking at 31, and I'm just going to kind of zoom in for a little bit, it's where we're seeing right here is Brady, and then this is Holton, and kind of goes over Water Street. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is this location that we're referring to, is this in the city and county of Milwaukee, state of Wisconsin?
Yes.
All right. Now, you indicated that when you arrived on scene, you saw the fire department doing something. What was that?
They were conducting life-saving measures on the victim.
Can you just say that again, Laura?
They were doing life-saving measures on the victim.
And that's later determined to be Jason Cameron, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did he survive his injuries?
He did not.
All right. So when you first arrived on scene, where was he situated? How was he laying?
He was actually positioned towards the top of the stairs.
And you were referring to the stairs, are we talking about this kind of like little ladder thing where we can see the 1, the 2, the 3, kind of in that area?
Yes.
Okay. And how was he situated near the top of the stairs?
He was face down.
Now, while you were present, and he was face down, did the fire department or anybody do anything?
Yes. They moved the victim on a more level surface of the concrete, and they turned him over on his back so they can do CPR.
Were those successful?
No.
You got it.
Yes.
Okay. When they turned him over, could you see if he had any injuries?
Yes.
What was it?
A gunshot wound at the time, to the face, to the head.
Were you wearing a body camera? Okay. And I'm going to, just for one moment. Your Honor, I have State's Exhibit number 83 currently set up into the system. The court will bear with me since we have antiquated equipment. I'm moving from the Elmo to my computer. Hopefully this will work. One moment. For the record, I've been told just picking it up and putting it back down sometimes clears it. And it does. Now, Detective, or officer, when we're looking at this, you watch your body cam, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And as we can see, there's, 20 minutes, 46 seconds that was on your body cam, right?
Yes.
Now, going to approximately 1 minute and 2 seconds into your body camera, you watch this, is that correct?
Yes.
Is this a fair and accurate copy of the recording of what had happened when you went to the scene at that moment?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I will be playing the portion of Detective Krem-Servoa, her body cam, which is labeled Krem-Servoa IR 202660171 for purposes of the record. Starting at 1 minute and 2 seconds into the recording.
Fine.
And I'm gonna put the volume on. And pausing at 1 minute and 43 seconds. Does that portion reflect and show them both the manner in which the victim was first found and then the fire department moved?
Yes.
Your Honor, the portion would move those, the state would move those portions of State's Exhibit number 83 that were played in evidence at this time.
Any objection? The evidence is admitted. Go ahead.
Detective, I have one additional mask, does not belong there. The one additional portion I'd like to talk about. While you were kind of along that railing area and watching what occurred, we could see that when they turned him over, like, what was in his pocket, in the victim's pocket?
A cell phone?
It appeared his cell phone was
Yes.
there, right? Okay. Now, additionally, officer, sorry, detective, I keep demoting you. Did you observe any other potential piece of evidence that you kind of made sure that people were aware to stay away from?
Yes, I found a 9mm casing, spine casing on a sidewalk near the victim.
And made sure that that was where it was, and detectives come in, they take it from there, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, I have no further questions.
Cross.
Okay, Detective, I just had a few questions for you, just a couple. All right, so on that night, you were one of the first responding officers, right?
Yes.
Who were the other officers that responded with you? Were you the first one on the scene, or were there other officers there as well?
There were other officers. We kind of arrived at the approximate same time. And my partner was Officer Nebraska.
Okay. Officer Nebraska, what about Officer Darren?
He was there as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
I believe Officer Michalik was there, and I wouldn't.
Officer who?
Michalik.
You know how to spell that?
Yeah, it's Michalak.
Okay?
If I'm not mistaken.
All right, now, we had a chance to just see the body cam on the screen over there and over here. Did you review your body cam before you came to court today?
Not today, no, I didn't.
Have you seen it before?
Yes.
All right. And there on the body camera, we were able to see that it was pretty dark and there was flashlights being used, right?
Yes, I was one of the people that used the flashlight.
Okay. Do you remember what the lighting situation was in terms of the, I would guess, you know, the actual city or street lighting?
Not specifically, no.
Okay, but we could see on the camera that that staircase was dark, right?
I mean, it was nighttime.
Okay. And in order to illuminate anything, you had to use your flashlight.
I mean, when I arrive on scene and it's dark outside, we tend to use flashlights to, you know, look around the area to potentially find evidence, etc.
Okay. Now, as far as your scope of investigation, were there any other tasks you had that night?
That night I remained with the evidence, which was the casing, and with the victim, which was nearby in the general same area.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Burger.
State of anything else?
No, thank you.
You can step down, detective, thank you. State's next witness.
State calls Detective Klabundi.
Fine.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Please be seated. State your full name, spelling first and last for the record.
That's Alexander Klabundi, Alexander. Klabundi is Klabunde.
Detective, you can take your mask off if you're comfortable with that.
Thank you.
State can proceed.
Thank you. How are you employed, sir?
As a detective with the City of Milwaukee Police Department.
How long have you been with the police department?
This is going into 18 years now.
And in terms of your assignment, where are you currently assigned?
The homicide unit.
How long have you been with the homicide unit?
Over 3 years.
Now, I want to draw your attention to the homicide of Jason Clearman that occurred on September 22nd of 2020. Did you work on that? And the area of around 1750 North Holton, or basically Holton and Brady, is that where you went?
Yes,
Is that in the city and county of Milwaukee and state of Wisconsin?
it is.
Are you familiar with the term scene detective?
Yes.
What is a scene detective?
Scene detective's responsibility is the scene investigation, documenting evidence recovered and observed at the scene.
And when you are looking at a scene or attempting to investigate a scene, is there anybody that assists you regarding that investigation?
I typically have a partner assisting me, yes.
And what about photographs? Is there anybody that assists you with that?
Yes, typically a police officer or forensic investigator assigned to the investigation, or I'm sorry, they changed their name off in the identification division.
And basically they assist you out, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, when you are doing your scene investigation, do you wait until every witness has been talked to, or do you kind of get in there and start trying to investigate that scene?
I typically am investigating the scene almost immediately after being briefed the basic information of the incident.
Okay. So do you know always what is and what is potentially not involved in a homicide when you're doing your scene investigation?
Not always during the initial scene investigation.
Do you err on the side of caution sometimes when trying to find certain evidence?
Yes.
Now, detective, when you are doing your scene investigation, you see various potential things in an area, what do you do?
I would document them, where their location is. We have numbered markers that we will place for items that are going to be collected. And there are also stickers that can be used for different items, evidence that are being collected, as well as letters in certain situations. Typically, letters are used for blood sample collections or other sample collections.
Okay. Now, detective, I want to draw your attention to State's Exhibit number 31 that we see here currently on the big screen. I'm going to kind of fill that up there. Do you recognize what we're looking at here?
I do.
What is this?
This is a diagram of the scene, a computer-generated diagram of the scene.
And if we're looking at the scene investigation or the scene map as to what we're looking at here, was this created based on your scene investigation?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And in terms of what we're looking at here based on this, is this a fair and accurate kind of representation of where things were and where you found them?
Yes, it's not to exact measurements. It's just general area where the evidence was located that day.
Now, detective, or at this point, Your Honor, State would move State's Exhibit number 31 into evidence.
Any objection? Fine, received.
Your Honor, I have a copy for the court as well as copies for the jury, if I may hand them out.
Fine. Any objection?
No.
Fine.
Your Honor, I handed them all out to the jury.
Fine.
Now, detective, I kind of want to walk through this scene in just a little bit as regards to some photos and talk about what we have here, but just so we orient ourselves. If we're looking here on Holton and Brady, Water, Pearson, is this kind of how these streets all interact with each other?
Yes, and it should be noted, Holton Street, as it starts north of Brady, becomes a bridge crossing the Milwaukee River. So where Water Street is, it's actually running below Holton Street.
Okay. And just kind of like, what's underneath Holton or kind of in this area by Water Street that we see underneath the bridge?
Once you go past North Water Street, there's a park called Swing Park. It has a bunch of suspended swings hanging from the bridge, and then there's what's termed a marsupial bridge that's a footpath bridge below the Holton Street Bridge that continues to the opposite side of the river.
Okay, and if we're seeing here, it says not on the scale, right?
Correct.
Okay. And then the N with an arrow pointing north, what does that show us, detective?
It indicates that north on this map is towards the top of the map.
Okay, and just so everyone can figure this out, but if north is to the top of the map, east would be to the right as we're looking at it.
Correct.
West to the left, south to the bottom.
That's all correct.
Okay. Now, Detective, I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 1. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
It's a photograph taken during the scene investigation. This would be taken from Holton Street, and the angle would be southeast.
So when you're saying southeast, if we kind of look beyond where these trees are, kind of in there, is that looking towards that intersection of Holton and Brady?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 2. Do you recognize that?
I do. Another photograph taken during the scene investigation. This one is looking generally east.
And kind of just from the same same general area, but just at a different angle, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. In particular, we're going to come back to this, but this vehicle that we see that is kind of by the bike lane area, off of on the street side, is that going to be the victim's vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. We'll come back to that in a minute. Now, I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 3. What is that?
Another scene photograph, again, from a closer viewpoint towards that sidewalk near where it's a Kia that we had just indicated in the previous photo.
Okay. And then I kind of want to just talk a little bit about what we're discussing here. First of all, we can see what appears to be a yellow tarp covering something. What is that?
So that's a yellow tarp covering the body of Jason Clearman.
Okay. And if we're looking at this, we can see the sidewalk. Then eventually there's kind of like this little wall here, right? Separating the street from the sidewalk?
Correct. It's a concrete barrier that seems to be designed to prevent vehicles from striking any pedestrians on the curve of this bridge.
Okay. And if where the victim's body is, what's there?
So where you can see that there's a metal fence along the edge there as the bridge begins, and there's a inset where the victim's body is. It's a landing towards the top of a staircase that then leads down north towards Water Street below.
Now, additionally, these are going to come into play here, but we see this little yellow marker number 3 kind of stacked on a bunch of them. What happens with these yellow photo markers as you start getting into this case?
So those markers are set where items of evidence are observed in order to mark for the photographs for them to be easily seen.
And this is just kind of, it's being pre-positioned, getting ready to go. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 4. What are we looking at here?
This is another photograph of Mr. Clearman's body. The tarp was partially removed from his body in this photograph.
Now, I want to be very clear about this, detective. When you arrived on the scene, was he already in this location?
He was at that location with the yellow tarp over him, laying on his back as he's depicted in this picture.
And so this is the manner in which you encountered him?
Yes.
Okay. So if he had been down, kind of face down on the stairs or anything else, people had moved him by the time you got here and started having pictures taken?
That's correct.
Okay. And I want to kind of draw your attention just for one moment. We can kind of see some discolorization on the stairs. What is that exactly?
That appeared to be blood stains that collected on the top of the landing near Mr. Clearman's body.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 5. What are we looking at here, Detective?
This photograph is closer to Mr. Clearman's body, looking downwards towards the stairs that lead down towards Water Street, and there's additional blood on the top of those stairs, and then the top 2 stairs that led down.
And those top 2 stairs, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 6. Can we actually see how that blood was kind of pooling on the second stair down and going down? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibits numbers 1 through 6 in your evidence at this time.
Any objection? They're received.
Now, where do those stairs go?
They go down towards Water Street. I believe there's a sidewalk that leads at the bottom to Water Street.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 7. Do we see those stairs continuing kind of down towards that area down south by Water, around by Swing Park?
Yes, this is just further down the staircase looking back towards Mr. Clearman's body.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 8. And does that show us kind of going all the way down to underneath that bridge?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibits number 7 and 8.
Any objection? Fine, received.
Now, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 9. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And in particular, we can see a photo marker has now been placed and is kind of in this area. You can see photo marker number 3. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. What was that photo marker number 3?
That marker number 3 was positioned next to a Google cell phone in a black case.
Okay. And if when we see from an officer or an officer's body cam that camera had been in the victim's front pocket, by the time you get there, it's already off to the side.
This phone, yes, this is the position that I encountered the phone in.
Now, I want to draw your attention to the defendant's left hand, showing you State's Exhibit number 10. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
What are we seeing there?
There appears to be blood on his left hand in this photograph.
Mr. Avery said defendant. Mr. Clearman.
Yes, Mr. Clearman. I'm showing you Mr. Clearman's left hand. I'm also going to show you Mr. Clearman's right hand in photo marker number 11. What do we see here?
There appears to be blood on this hand as well.
And as we're looking at 10 and 11, there appears to be blood in both hands.
Correct.
Okay. But specifically, if we're looking at 11, the victim's right hand, this one appears to have more blood on the palm. Is that accurate?
Yes, there does seem to be a larger amount of blood on this hand than the opposite hand, and it seems to be concentrated on the palm.
Okay. Right hand, maybe if there was something or holding something, could explain how you get blood in the palm. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Overruled.
Detective, you ever had a bloody nose?
Yes.
You ever held something up with your right hand?
Yes.
You ever gotten blood on your hand?
Yes.
Does that look like somebody would maybe be bleeding?
I believe that's possible, yes.
Could also be blood from being shot in the head though, right?
I agree.
Okay. Now, detective, if we're looking at the left hand, here we see a little bit of blood on the inside palm, but in this case, the blood appears to be on the outside of the hand. Is that correct?
I agree.
Also, we're seeing things around kind of the thumb and around his hand. What does that look like?
It seems to be smaller droplets, similar to something being sprayed almost.
Sometimes referred to as blood splatter.
Sure, yes.
But in fairness, you don't know how any of these blood got on any of these locations on his hands or on his body.
No, they were just there as you are seeing them when I arrived.
Your Honor, the state moves 9, 10, and 11 to
Fine, received.
Now, detective, I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 12. What are we looking at here?
This is a photograph of the sidewalk just to the west of Mr. Clearman's body. There's two evidence markers, number 1 and number 2. Number 1, there is a 9mm casing next to. And number 2, you can't see the item, but there is a plastic juice bottle that had been left there.
I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 13, kind of from a different angle. Again, what was that photo marker number 1?
That's a 9mm fired casing.
Okay. And as we can see, we see where the victim's shoe kind of is?
Yes, that's Mr. Clearman's shoe.
Okay. And then, as we're seeing, photo marker number 2 is the bottle?
Yes.
Now, detective, I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 14. What is State's Exhibit number 14?
That's a closer view of evidence marker number 1 in the 9mm casing that I had located.
I now want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 32. Why don't you take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it.
I do. It's a 9mm casing and the original packaging that I placed it in when I took it back to the Milwaukee Police Administration building and inventoried it.
Now, you just mentioned a number of different things there. I want to talk about how we can tell that this item of evidence came from the location we're talking about and is here in our hand. First of all, you mentioned inventory. What's an inventory number?
An inventory number is a number assigned to a report that is just documenting the Milwaukee Police taking custody of an item.
And is there any markings or anything on here that lets us know you're the one that was basically inventoried this?
There are. I initialed the tape where it was sealed.
And the inventory number lets us know item number 1 is photo marker number 1.
That's correct.
Okay, so we can see literally AK and then the inventory number and the date is written on this manila envelope. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, this manila envelope, is this what you originally packaged it in?
The manila envelope, yes.
This plastic, does this let us know that another agency, for example, the crime lab, is taking a look at this?
Yes, I recognize that as the manner that the state crime lab repackages items after they've examined them.
All right. We have to wait to hear from them to find out what happened there, but this is the manner in which you found this cartridge casing, and we've seen photo marker number 1. Can you, based on everything we discussed, there's all the hallmarks of this being, in fact, the 9mm cartridge casing you recovered?
Yes.
Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibit number 32.
Any objection? Received.
Thank you. Your Honor, the state would also move State's Exhibits numbers 12 through 14 in evidence.
Received.
Now, I guess just briefly, looking at State's Exhibit number 15, what was it, photo marker number 2?
It's a plastic juice bottle. I think the brand was Juiced.
Again, don't know if it's relevant. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Inventoried it, photographed it, put it on inventory.
Correct. It was one of the few items that were close to Mr. Clearman's body at the time.
Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibit number 15 in evidence.
Received.
Detective, did you also have the opportunity to look through and see if Mr. Clearman had anything in his pockets?
I was present when the forensic investigator from the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner's Office did go through his pockets.
For example, in State's Exhibit number 16 in the back pocket, what, if anything, was recovered?
Those are some U.S. currency.
Okay. And showing you what has been marked in State's Exhibit number 17.
A set of keys.
Okay. And in State's Exhibit number 18.
It was a set of a pair of earbuds and then a folding knife.
The state would move State's Exhibits number 16, 17, and 18 into evidence.
Received.
Now, Detective, I want to just kind of go back for one moment to the vehicle. We spoke a little bit about that. I'm showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 19. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
It's a view of the front of a Kia Soul that I knew that Mr. Clearman had exited from.
Showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 20. Do you recognize that?
The passenger side of that same vehicle.
And staying on that side, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 21.
That's a closer view of the front passenger side of that vehicle.
Okay. Now, if we're looking at the front passenger side of the vehicle, specifically, I want to draw your attention to the front passenger door as well as the window. What, if anything, do you see there, Detective?
So I observed that the window is almost completely down, but still partially up, and there appeared to be blood on the top of the window. It seemed to be on like both sides and the top of the window.
Okay. I'm going to show you also what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 22, and we see that in a little bit better relief now of what appears to be blood, kind of in a little spot there by the door, and as well as on the window.
That's correct.
You're under the state would move State's Exhibit numbers 19 through 22 in evidence at this time.
No objection?
Received.
Now, detective, staying on this vehicle, going to the driver's side of this vehicle, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 23. Do you recognize that?
I do. It's the same TSO we've observed with the driver's door open.
Okay. And if we're looking at State's Exhibit number 24, what do we see there?
A closer view from the open driver's door towards the passenger door.
Okay. And just so we kind of have a little bit of it, when we're looking at the passenger door now from the inside, detective, what can we see what appears to be on the window and then also on the interior of the driver's side door?
I can see. I'm sorry, on the passenger side door, I can see on the top of the door above the armrest near the window, there's some blood as well as still blood visible on the window.
Okay. I now want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 25. What are we looking at here, detective?
It's another close view more towards the floorboard of the driver's side, like front seat of this vehicle.
And in particular, detective, is there going to be anything of note that you observed down by the driver's side kind of area between the seat and the door well?
A pair of eyeglasses.
I'll show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 27. What is that?
That's the pair of eyeglasses.
Okay. And then showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 28. What does that show us?
The same eyeglasses with evidence marker number 4 placed next to them.
Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibits numbers 23 through 25, as well as 27 through 28.
Just one moment, please.
Just so everybody's aware, gave defense counsel the numbers of all of them, and they had previously seen all these photos.
Fine, there's no objection, no received.
I want to show you now what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 26. What are we looking at here?
It's the rear driver's side, door open in the rear driver's side passenger compartment of the vehicle.
Your Honor, the state moves 26 in evidence.
Any objection? Received.
Now, detective, in this vehicle, did you find any firearms?
No.
Find any weapons?
No.
Now, detective, additionally, I want to show you when you had the forensic investigator with you, did you also have them attempt to see if they could look at the front passenger door for any possible latent evidence?
I did. I requested that they examine that area for latent fingerprint evidence.
And why that area in particular?
I had been advised that the suspect involved in this incident had approached that portion of the vehicle prior to the shooting occurring.
At this point, when you guys are dealing with this, did you have any idea who the suspect was?
No.
Did you have any name?
No.
No one had called and said they'd been involved in this other than 911 callers calling for the victim?
Not correct. Not during the scene investigation.
Now, detective, showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 29 and 30, were there possible latent prints that were found on that passenger side of the vehicle?
Yes, they're indicated by this evidence sticker mark number 2. And
One and 2, is that correct?
correct, I didn't see 1 at first.
You see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, the state would move 29 and 30.
Any objection?
No.
Received.
And Detective, just returning for one moment, if we are looking at the scene diagram, in fact, those evidence markers, those stickers 1 and 2 are on there, is that correct?
Yes.
I now want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 84. 84. If we're looking at State's Exhibit number 84, Detective, do you recognize what we see here?
I do. It's a variation of the scene diagram, this time used by using a Google map of the area of Holton and Brady Street.
Okay. Again, is this drawing to scale?
No.
But can we see where the vehicle, where Mr. Edgecombe's body was in relationship to Holton and Brady, generally speaking?
Generally speaking, yes.
And if we're looking at that, can we also see a Zanya's Pizza and a Casablanca amongst other potential buildings?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, the state would move 84 into evidence.
Received.
Has a copy. I'm going to give the court a copy as well, and I have a copy for the jury, unless you guys have any issues.
I'm proposed to hand it out to the jury.
Now, Detective, in addition to what we've just discussed, are you familiar with the term pole camera? What's a pole camera?
A pole camera is a camera just mounted typically on a light pole or another type of pole, elevated, that casts a view of a street or other area.
Okay. And was there a pole camera that is in play in terms of what happened in this incident?
There's I believe 2 cameras mounted at the intersection of Holton Street and Brady Street that are operated by the Milwaukee Police Department.
And in fact, is that operated by the Fusion Center?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So while this investigation is happening, officers are responding to the scene, you're going to be a detective, the scene investigation. Do you learn that the Fusion Center believes that they caught portions of this on camera?
Yes.
And did the Fusion Department at that time take the portions of the incident and copy them for you guys?
They did.
Okay. Just so we're clear, they were just getting the incidents and just getting them to you that night. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, this is as the investigation is ongoing.
Yes.
Attempting to get pictures and descriptions and identify whoever's involved in shooting the victim.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I just ask how much more you have of this witness? Take a short break at some point.
We can take it now if you want. I gotta get the camera up and ready.
All right, perfect.
Why don't we take a 10-minute recess for the jury? Okay, in the gallery, don't move until the jury's been excused, please. Deputy Bond, if you want to show the jury out. We'll take a 10-minute break. Leave your notepads where they are. We'll take 10 or 15 minutes. We'll come back, continue with testimony. Everybody else can remain seated for now. The jury can go out, please.
All right, here we go.
Detective, you can step down, take a short recess, 10 minutes off the record. bringing the defendant out, then we're going back in. Appearances remain the same. The defendant's in court. He's in street clothes. I'm going to bring the jury back in a minute. The jury's out. So stay ready with the next question or exhibit with this witness.
Yes.
All right, let's bring the jury in. Everybody can remain seated. Yes, jury's coming in. You can remain seated, please. All right, the jury's back. State's next witness, or I should say, can you continue with this witness? Next question.
Thank you. Detective, I just wanted to revisit just for one moment, the folding knife that we're talking about. Which pocket was that in of the victim's pants?
It would have been the right front pocket.
Right front pocket? And where was it in the pocket?
It was completely within the pocket. When I observed it pulled out, medical examiner Crystal Green, medical examiner investigator Crystal Green had to reach into the pocket, pull it out, and when she pulled it out, it was folded.
Okay. And I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 33. Does this have all the markings of everything that lets us know which one of the items you inventoried?
Yes.
Okay. And opening up State's Exhibit number 33, you pull it out. Is that the knife that was found inside the pocket?
It is.
Your Honor, the state moves 33 now.
Any objection?
No. Was this the manner in which it was found inside the pocket?
It is.
Now, detective, we had talked about also how, right before we took a break, that Fusion Center had notified the homicide, look, we've got the incident on camera, we downloaded the portion of the incident and made it available for you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so not even you guys asking for a certain portion, Fusion just says, we caught what happened on camera, we're gonna give you copies of what happened.
Yes.
All right, and that was that night?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 35. Your Honor, for the record, I have State's Exhibit number 35 already set up to play on the computer. There is one video file on the computer, or on the exhibit, I should say. Now, detective, as we are looking at what we're basically seeing here, can you orient us for what we're looking at here?
Yes. So this camera view is facing eastbound on Brady Street. The camera is mounted right at the intersection of, to the north it's Holton Street where the bridge is, to the south is Van Buren. Holton and Van Buren are the same street, they just changed names once they're on either side of Brady Street. So this is facing east on Brady Street from Holton / Van Buren.
Overruled. We don't need a sidebar. Go ahead. There's an objection. I'm overruling the objection. Let's take and proceed.
Now, just, Detective, to be very clear, these poll cams that we're about to talk about are kept by the Milwaukee Police Department, is that correct?
Yes,
And they're run by the Fusion Center, not by homicide.
correct.
In this case, were you the detective that actually got the first clips from Fusion?
I was not.
Who was that?
Detective Michael Fidel.
He's currently not available, is he?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you observe him as soon as he got them?
As soon as he got them?
Yes.
I observed them relatively quickly after returning to the police administration building that day.
Okay, so you're getting them that night?
Correct.
All right. And just so we're clear, the clips were taken by Fusion Center?
Yes, yes.
Can you explain what we mean by that?
So the Fusion Center saves a portion of the video outside of the main, I guess, DVR, and they produced a DVD containing the video files that they turned over to us.
They, just to be clear, is them stating, we've got this incident on camera, here you go, Hunter.
Correct.
Okay. Now, detective, shooting scenes sometimes occur near poll cams, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you guys grab hours and hours of all the time that someone is on the scene when you're doing a homicide investigation?
No, typically the relevant portion of the incident is what we save and record.
Okay. And that would be, as we talked about, Fusion putting it on a CD, getting it to you guys?
Yes.
Okay. Now, detective, the video is kept for a period of time, is that correct?
Yes.
And in the pursuit of this case, you were asked to see if any of the rest of this poll cam was still available.
Correct.
Is it?
No.
How long is that kept?
I believe it's 90 days at the most, but it's somewhere between 60 and 90 days only.
And that would be from the incident?
Yes, from the point that the event is initially recorded.
And in this case, that would have been a couple months before anyone is apprehended in this incident.
Correct.
Okay. Now, detective, I want to be very clear. When you guys are going to get it, did you specifically tell anybody, I only want this clip to this clip?
I did not.
You were asking for the incident.
That's what was requested. I believe it was offered initially to our unit while we were in the middle of the scene investigation.
You guys are in the middle of the scene investigation. Someone says you have it on camera. They say, get it to us. That's what we got.
Yes.
Okay. Now, detective, now coming back here to State's Exhibit number 35. We can see here this truck, this Reinhardt truck. Is that correct?
Yes.
What business establishment it is in front of?
It's Zena's Pizza.
Okay. And if you were to go a little bit eastbound, staying on the north side of the street, what kind of really fancy building do we see right there?
The next building to the east is Casablanca Restaurant.
Okay. And then as you're continuing to look down eastbound, we can see that there are a number of houses and potentially some businesses down there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, detective, have you previously watched this video?
Yes.
Okay. Is it a fair and accurate copy of the video that was downloaded that night that reflects what happens?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to play from 1 second into this video, and I'm going to stop at a few points, and then at the end, we'll just play it in continuation so that down further down the area.
Yes,
To be clear, at this point, the vehicle that's later determined to contain the victim and his wife is further east of what we can see.
yes.
And just so we're clear also, is there a time stamp and a time hack on this quote?
There is. It's listed as Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020 at 7:47 PM and 30 seconds.
Okay, so at 7:47 PM, the victim's vehicle is not even visible on this camera.
Correct.
Okay. Not fully in there, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to play from this portion of 30 seconds into the video. I'm going to pause at 38 seconds. What have we seen the Reinhardt vehicle do here?
Pulled away from the curb and started driving west towards the intersection of Holton or Van Buren.
Okay. And we're about to see some vehicles pulling up, some of which are important, some of which are not. Is that correct?
Yes.
Playing from this portion at 38 seconds into the same recording. And pausing at 48 seconds. So we see that that vehicle that was directly behind the truck has kind of gone past it,
Correct.
not the clearman's vehicle.
No.
Are we going to see the clearman's vehicle eventually start arriving from further eastbound?
Yes.
Starting and replaying from that same spot at 48 seconds. Pausing at 1 minute and 3 seconds into the recording. We're looking at it. Do you recognize the vehicle that we're seeing here?
I do. It was the Kia Soul that was parked near Mr. Clearman's body on Holden Street during the scene investigation.
Okay. And how many people do there appear to be inside the vehicle?
I observed 2 on this video.
Now, I want to be very clear. We're at 7:48 and 4. Did we see the clearman's vehicle come into view?
Yes.
This is when it first is arriving in the area of Casablanca.
Yes.
Okay. Playing from that portion of 1 minute and 3 seconds into the video. And pausing at 1 minute and 10 seconds into the video. Detective, are we about to see in the distance something that's going to become important?
Yes.
What are we going to see?
A black male riding a bicycle.
Okay. And there appears to be kind of a vehicle behind him, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Playing from that portion at 1 minute and 11 seconds into the video. And pausing at 1 minute and 38 seconds into that video. What did we just see, Detective?
Objection, Judge. This question asks the witness to speculate about actions or acts of the parties. There was a pretrial warning that such evidence would come in.
No, there wasn't. He's not speculating, he's testifying what he believes he saw on that video. Overruled.
When we're looking up, what do we see in terms of what happens?
So I observed the male on the bicycle approach the front passenger side window of the Kia Soul, lean towards that window and then punch the front passenger, who I know to be Jason Clearman, in the head area.
Now, to be clear, you can't tell any of the circumstances of what happens. Like, as to what led to this, is that correct?
Correct.
All you're seeing is what we see on the video.
Yes.
Okay. In particular, I want to draw your attention. Does the door kind of open after this person on the bicycle takes off?
Yes.
Okay. And in fairness, let's just make sure we're absolutely clear about this. After what appears to be consistent with a punch, the bicyclist keeps going, right?
Correct.
Now, I want to draw your attention. Right here, are we close to the corner of where Brady goes in the hole?
Yes, within approximately 1 to 2 car lengths.
Okay. Now, we can see this video goes on for another, minute and 20 seconds.
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything really of note that is visited on that minute and 20 seconds?
Not that I remember.
You want it? Okay, I got it. I will play just that portion of it. And that is to the end of the video. Now, Your Honor, the state would move state's exhibits number 35 in evidence.
Received.
Was there also a poll cam feed that captures what happens once everybody rounds the corner?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, I have placed state's exhibit number 34 into the big screen. There is also, okay, that's not good. Let me do it again. There we go. Now, take it off the interactive zoom for right now. I have it set up on 0 minutes and 0 seconds into the recording. Detective, we previously had seen that Reinhardt's van that had been basically stopped and then the victim's vehicle behind it. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so we can see kind of now how close where we were looking at is to what we're about to look at.
Correct.
Playing from that portion at 0 minutes and 0 seconds into the recording. And just pausing at 5 seconds into the recording. Detective, what are we seeing?
The Reinhardt van has started to drive westbound, followed by the bicyclist that we observed in the previous video, also going westbound currently.
Okay. And we can kind of see what his clothing is that correct?
Yes, it looked like he had a white t-shirt on with a dark colored vest.
Okay. Now, Playing from that portion at 5 seconds into the recording. Pausing at 10 seconds into the recording. Detective, what are we seeing now?
The bicyclist has turned northbound onto Holden Street and is traveling north. And
in particular, do we now see a vehicle coming into view?
yes, the Kia Soul with Mr. Clearman inside of it.
Okay. Playing from that portion at 10 seconds into the recording. Detective, we're talking about here. This area that we can see where there were two subjects, but one has disappeared, is that the area where you found the victim's body?
It is.
Okay. And how many vehicles can we see are kind of pulled over in that area right now?
Only one pulled over at the curb line, the Kia Soul that was on the scene when I arrived.
And is there another vehicle behind it?
There's another vehicle behind it on Holden Street, nothing like directly behind it.
Okay. I'm just going to come back just for one moment here. And if we're looking, just actually go back. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to 13 seconds into the recording. We can now see the Kia Soul. And detective, I want to draw your attention and pause at 19 to 20 seconds into that recording. Talk about the clearance. Is there another vehicle behind it?
Yes.
Playing from that portion at 20 seconds. Does it kind of pull behind the Clearman's area?
Yes, I apologize before, but the angle of this video made it, or the angle of this TV made it look like two vehicle, or one vehicle rather than two, as I was observing it right now.
The vehicle that we saw behind the Clearman's Kia Soul, what does it do after the victim kind of disappears from view there?
I believe it continued northbound.
I'm also going to play and continue on from 32 seconds into the recording. Detective, what are we seeing regarding the Clearman's vehicle?
It has its hazard lights on and is stopped near the curb line.
And as we're pausing at 1 minute and 14, we can see kind of a red vehicle's made a U-turn and is pulling behind it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm going to play that portion again. And in particular, detective, I'm now going to use, for the record, the effects and filter on this program, going to geometry, going to interactive zoom, and using the interactive zoom to zoom to the best we have with my technology. Can we see now a little closer the area where you were discussing on the scene?
Yes.
Okay. For the record, Your Honor, I have the video paused at 6 seconds into the interactive zoom. I'm going to put it on the full screen, get a little bit or closer, and playing from that portion. Your Honor, the state would move State's Exhibit number 34 into evidence.
Received.
One moment, Judge. Nothing else, thank you.
It's 4:35, we can at least start with cross.
All right. Now, Detective, you had a variety of responsibilities in this case, right?
Yes,
So one of that was arriving at the scene and evidence collection.
yes,
The other responsibility was submitting things into evidence,
yes,
such as inventorying information and things that are collected at the scene,
yes,
okay? Also, in making sure that you retain custody of critical items and evidence, right?
yes,
Okay. And then you, fair to say, are the lead detective in this case?
yes, I'm one of several detectives that have worked on this case.
And as far as the evidentiary items, those are maintained at the property department of the MPD, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't mind if you move around, because the state moves around, but you gotta speak up a little, so the jury and my reporter can hear you.
Councilor, you mind? Go ahead. And ladies and gentlemen, were you able to hear me before? Okay. All right. So I want to talk to you first about some of the evidence that you collected at the scene. Is a projector. Okay, now Detective, we already saw this photo, right? This is Exhibit 26.
Yes,
That's an open intoxicant in the front passenger side of the vehicle. Correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
That is an open intoxicant in the front passenger side of the vehicle, right?
No, that's incorrect. That's it's a can of White Claw in the rear driver's side door of the vehicle.
Well, isn't White Claw an alcoholic beverage?
Yes, but it was not in the front passenger door of the vehicle.
I meant the rear passenger side. Okay.
It's the rear driver's side, sir.
Apologize, my mistake. I meant the front driver's side.
Your Honor, it's not front anywhere.
The rear driver's side.
Correct.
The rear driver's side.
Okay, that is the rear driver's side door of the vehicle, right?
Yes,
My mistake. So that item of evidence, that wasn't inventoried in this case, right?
no,
But you had inventoried a juice bottle?
Correct. The juice bottle I inventoried because it was found on the scene near the victim's body.
Okay, but you had also, you said, had looked through the vehicle, right?
Yes.
You had searched the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. And this item wasn't tested in terms of any kind of DNA or anything like that, right?
No.
Okay. Now, Exhibit 18, we already saw this as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, this is a picture of the knife that was found in the front right pocket.
Yes.
As you stated, right?
Yes.
Okay, do you have the knife in front of you?
I'm sorry?
No. Exhibit 33, Detective Frank Davis, Chief, can you retrieve the knife out of the bag? Okay, can you open that knife up? Can you tell us, to your knowledge, what the length of that knife is?
To my knowledge, I'm not sure. The overall length or the length of the blade, I mean, I would have to guess here without a ruler in front of me.
The overall length of that knife?
The overall length of the knife?
Including the
Well, there's
blade?
the blade or the blade and the handle.
Either way, without a ruler, I would be guessing.
You can make a
Like
educated guess.
maybe 10 inches total length. It appears to be less than a foot.
Okay, can you give us a brief description of that knife? Identify some of its features.
Sure, it has a black handle. There's a blade release that seems to have like a tension release that allows the blade to fold. And when it folds open, it locks into place. When it isn't locked into place, it loosely moves back and forth.
Okay, and that blade, that's a serrated blade, right?
The edge of the blade is serrated.
Okay, can you tell us what kind of model that knife is?
It appears on the blade itself, it's listed as Spyderco G2 stainless.
Okay, and Detective, are you familiar with that kind of a knife?
With a folding knife, yes.
What about that specific model?
I have never owned or handled this specific model of knife prior to this incident and today.
Okay. So you would estimate it's maybe around 10 inches or so?
Yeah, that's my estimate.
Okay. And as far as the blade, not the blade, the handle, can you give us an estimate of about the grip there?
Maybe 5 or 6 inches.
All right. Now, when these photographs were taken, like we just saw in Exhibit 18 and Exhibit 26, there were many photographs that were taken that night, right?
You said there were many, I'm sorry.
There were many photographs that were taken.
Yes.
Correct? Okay. And one of the things that you're going to do at a crime scene is kind of just understand the area, and that's why you had a map earlier, right?
Yeah.
What about specific dimensions of the scene in terms of measurements?
Yes, there's measurements taken using a laser measuring device.
Okay. Now, do you recall, Detective, if any measurements were made at the scene in terms of the length or the width of the sidewalk of that landing area?
Not of the sidewalk or the landing area, no.
Okay, but those scenes were obviously photographed, right?
Yes.
Okay? I'm going to show you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 1. I marked this as Exhibit D1. Detective, do you recognize this?
It's the landing at the top of the staircase where Mr. Clearman's body was found.
Okay, and that is fair and accurate representation of that specific landing, which is on Holton Street, correct?
Yes, it appears relatively unchanged since the time of the incident.
That's obviously because it's like a permanent concrete metal structure, right?
Yes.
Okay. And on the night of the incident, the only difference would have been that there was Mr. Clearman's body, right?
And the other evidence of other items of evidence that were there, yes.
Correct. So, did you have an opportunity to measure those dimensions there in that, if you would describe that, well, how would you describe that area right there?
As a landing at the top of a staircase.
So, did you have a chance to measure that landing?
I did not measure that landing.
Okay. If you had to estimate that distance, do you have any guess as to what the width and the length is? Because you were there.
It's approximate like 6 foot by 6 foot square, maybe.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 2. Now, fair to say that this is a more close-up photograph of that same landing?
Looks like it's an overhead photograph.
Okay. And that would be either the width or the length of one of the sides of that landing?
It looks like this is looking about south of it. So it'd be the east to west measurement from what I can tell from this photograph.
Okay. Now, just looking at that picture, are you able to see that there's a ruler there?
I can see that there's a ruler there.
Okay, are you able to tell maybe approximately how many feet and inches that length is shown?
I can't see any numbers on that ruler.
If I were to zoom in, do you think that would help?
I would imagine.
That's the start of the ruler that we're seeing where I'm pointing my finger, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, and the next, if we were to go the entire length of this photo, and apologize for the zoom there, approximately what do you see the reading here at the very edge?
I apologize. This is similar to an eye exam, but I think I'm seeing about 72 inches.
Okay, so you had said about 6 feet. And then accounting for, if you were to measure between the metal portions that we see here, from where it's measured to, let's say, somewhere in the middle between these, I'm going to zoom out. What about here? Yeah, hold on.
It's looking like 67 to me.
Okay. And that would be one of the edges. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have the chance, excuse me, to determine whether that area is a perfect square or if it's a rectangle?
I did not measure it to see what its dimensions were.
Okay. Okay. Now, at the scene, there was some clothing that was recovered, right? And let me be more specific, from Mr. Clearman's body?
So at the scene, Mr. Clearman's body was, from the scene, Mr. Clearman's body was transported by the Milwaukee County Medical Examiner to their office. And I did not take any clothing from Mr. Clearman's person at the scene.
All right, so you had no actual role in those items of evidence that may have been retrieved from Mr. Clearman's body, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I want to go back to some of the other exhibits that you saw earlier. For example, exhibit number 3. Right here. You had testified about this. Can you just briefly refresh your memory what that is?
This is just a scene photograph based on the evidence markers being stacked the way they are. It would have been at the beginning of the scene investigation because they haven't been placed anywhere.
And there's some lighting that is being employed to illuminate that area, right?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us what kind of lighting is used in these situations?
A flash from a camera flash.
What kind of camera is that? Is that specifically meant to photograph in the dark?
I don't know. I didn't take the photographs or use the camera, and I don't know which camera was used.
And right here in exhibit 7, there's also a camera flash that's being used to show the staircase, right?
Yes, there's a...
Now you were there that night, and so the staircase is very dark, right?
It wasn't illuminated. There wasn't any lighting going up and down the staircases, and it was already after about 8 p.m. that day.
Okay, so it was dark?
Yes.
Just a few more questions, Councilor Owens, if I'm fine.
And Detective, now you were there, did you use your flashlight at all in this process?
I believe I used a flashlight at some point during that investigation.
All right, now, we took a look at Exhibit 84, and this is going to be the scene sketch, or maybe a map, to be more specific. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know how this map was produced or what was used?
Yes, Google Maps, it's a screen captured image of a Google map of that intersection.
Okay. So it's a Google map, is that right?
Yes.
All right, now this map right here, this is specific to what we saw in the video, is that right?
It's specific to the video, the scene investigation, yes.
So what I mean to say is that map depicts the locations of what we saw in video number 1 and video number 2 just now, right?
It does.
Now, there was, based on what you testified, and an earlier incident that was right before what we saw on video number 1, which was the punch, right?
Yes.
Okay. You weren't able to determine where that occurred, right?
It occurred near the intersection of Brady Street and Holmes Street.
Okay, so let me be more specific. I was just referring to the previous incident before the punch, right?
Oh, I misunderstood you. I thought you were referring specifically to the punch that we watched on video. I apologize.
No, I'm talking about what occurred before that.
Okay.
Right, you were aware that there was an incident that occurred before that, right?
Yes.
Okay, you had learned that in the investigation when you were there on the ground.
I was briefed during the scene investigation that there was something that happened prior to the punch and prior to the shooting.
So when was this map drawn up? Or maybe more specifically, if it was taken from Google, when was that extracted from Google?
This specific Google image map would have been within the past week in preparation for trial.
Okay. So when it comes time to investigating a case, right, like when an incident occurs, your office or the department, they do the scene sketch, right?
Yes.
What other tools do they use to kind of understand the entire area that's at issue?
Well, being physically present, observing that scene, outside of satellite overhead images, I'm not sure I fully understand your question about understanding the scene as you're thinking.
The question was a little vague. Why don't we take it up tomorrow? Detective, you can step down. It's 4:55. We're gonna break for today. For the jury, you've heard the rules and regulations, so to speak, related to the trial. As I asked you yesterday, I'm gonna ask again that you not watch any TV or any reports about this case over the course of tonight, tomorrow, the next few days. I'm sure there will be coverage of the case. Please don't watch or view any reporting on any either station or Facebook or YouTube or anywhere you might come across anything. Please don't view or observe any of that, number one. Number two, please don't deliberate this case. Don't discuss it among yourselves. Please don't discuss anything with your family, your friends, relatives. Anything you might want to discuss about this case is off limits. So don't discuss anything about what you've heard in evidence. Again, the lawyers, the witnesses, myself, no conversations about this case whatsoever. Again, importantly, don't do any research either. Don't look things up. No research on terms or anything related to this case on, again, online, on your phone, on Google or whatever. We're going to try to start tomorrow between 8:30 and 8:45 at the latest. So I'm going to ask that you're back here around 8:15 or 8:20. My bailiffs will escort you out, explain to you where you need to be back here in my jury room for tomorrow. Please be back, as I said, about 8:15 or 8:20. I don't have anything else on my calendar tomorrow or Friday, so we'll devote all of the next 2 days to witnesses and testimony. If you have any questions, let my bailiff know on the way out. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow around 8:15 or 8:20. Everybody else can remain seated until the jury leaves, please.
You can leave the notebooks in the chair.
You can step down, Detective. All right, it's 5 o'clock. We're in recess for today. I'll see the lawyers back at 8:20. We'll try to start as close to 8:30 as possible. If we need to discuss anything, it can be briefly, and it can be briefly tomorrow morning. We're in recess for today. Thank you. Off the record.